Good evening. Welcome to today's meeting, Tuesday, October 9th, of the Lebanon Redevelopment Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and as per tradition, we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by our newest member, Mr. Robertson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let the minutes show that Dr. Taylor is absent, and that is excused, and that the rest of us are here this evening. Our first order of business is the approval of minutes, and I believe that would only be one set of minutes, correct?
No, it's two.
Two sets?
We have one for July the 9th and one for August 13th. And there was no meeting held on September 10th.
Okay.
So we're doing both of those, please.
I would entertain a motion. Excuse me, let's start out. Are there any comments or questions about the minutes from either July 9th or August 13th?
I will abstain since I was not there for either one of those meetings.
Will we have quorum?
Then we will have to table that until our next meeting. So that will be just fine. So we will have 3 sets of minutes to approve at our next meeting. Well, that was a quick one.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So moving on to old business, there currently is none on the agenda. So I'll take, go ahead.
I'd actually like to do the secretary, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I would consider that new business, so we'll bring that under the next part of the agenda. Sure. So as for the old business, there's none listed on the agenda for this evening. Before moving on, is there any questions or comments about anything at this point? Okay, we'll continue moving on through the agenda, and we'll move on to new business, and we'll start out with, thank you very much, Chris, for bringing that up, but to allow us to address 2 current openings on the commission, and that is for the vice president role as well as the secretary role. So we'll start out with the vice president role, and I would accept any nominations.
I would nominate Caleb Brown if he's interested for the position. Edwards, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I would second that nomination. Any comments, questions, campaign speeches? Entertain a...
Can I vote on that since I'm nominated?
I don't think that we can.
Okay.
So we cannot elect officers this evening because we don't have a majority.
With the officers proposed here. Is that right? I think so. Yeah, so we need to have a majority vote without that.
Okay, so item number 2 tabled. We'll continue on through the agenda.
Okay.
So that will be something to add to the agenda for next time, which would be adding the offices of secretary and vice president to the next meeting's agenda. So thanks for bringing it up, Chris. Sorry we couldn't move forward. Anyways, the first item under new business is the resolution 2018-12, which is the lease authorization of downtown phase 2. Tonight's agenda item is a public hearing for that resolution. But before we start the public hearing, we can do a reading from Chris.
Thank you very much. And if you would prefer, Commission, would you like to have folks from UMBA? We have Ms. Emma Adlam to discuss the financials, and or Catherine Finella, bond counsel, to kind of go through some of the particulars, or would you rather it be read first?
Just go ahead and let's go ahead with the reading.
Okay.
And as we go through that reading, if any questions surface, we know we have the resources available. Perfect.
Thank you, sir. So this is resolution number 2018-12. The resolution really speaks to the RDC, the Redevelopment Commission's governing redevelopment of the city. Several paragraphs of this resolution speak to what the Commission adopted with respect to prior allocation areas over the years. The Commission has amended these areas over time and subsequently expanded them. On October 9, 2017, this Commission consolidated the allocation areas. On May 14, 2018, the Commission then amended certain areas once again. So the commission has considered the need to finance the acquisition, construction, installation, and other items of certain local public improvements, as more particularly described in Exhibit A, which is attached to the lease, collectively the project in this case, in serving or benefiting the consolidated area. The authority has adopted the resolution approving of a proposed form of lease between the authority and the commission for the lease of the project and to provide for the issuance of lease rental revenue bonds of the authority to finance the cost of the project, including but not limited to capitalized interest on the bonds during the period of construction, funding a debt service reserve fund if necessary, either from proceeds of the bonds or by purchasing a reserve fund surety policy and costs relating to the issuance of such bonds. The preliminary plans, specifications, and cost estimates for the project have been filed with the Commission. There has been prepared and filed with the Commission a proposed lease, a copy of which is attached and made reference hereto as Exhibit A, to provide for the financing of the projects pursuant to the Indiana Code. Pursuant to that lease, the Commission intends to pay rent to the authority pursuant to the terms of the lease at an annual rate not to exceed $600,000, payable in semi-annual installments on February 1 and August 1, beginning on the day the project is completed and ready for use, or August 1st, 2020, whichever is later, through the expiration of the lease. The Commission intends to use the tax increment for payment of the lease rentals and reasonably expects that the lease rentals shall be payable solely from tax increment of the Commission available for the project and only to the extent such tax increment is insufficient from a special tax levied on all the property in the district in accordance with the Indiana Code. The Commission has published notice of a public hearing on the proposed lease pursuant to the Indiana Code and will hold a public hearing on this date concerning whether to approve the proposed lease, and all interested parties have been provided the opportunity to be heard at the hearing. Now therefore, if it's resolved by the Lebanon Redevelopment Commission, the Commission would approve the plans, specifications, and cost estimates which have been filed by the Commission, with the Commission. The President and Secretary of this Commission hereby authorize and direct on behalf of the Commission to execute and deliver the lease in substantially the form presented at this meeting, with such changes in form or substance as the President or any other officer of the Commission shall approve. Such approval to be conclusively evidenced by the execution thereof. The lease rentals to be paid by the Commission pursuant to the terms of the lease at an annual rate not to exceed $600,000, payable in semi-annual installments on February 1 and August 1, are subject to reduction as set forth in the lease. This Commission finds they are fair, reasonable, and the use of the project throughout the term of the lease will serve the public purpose of the city and is in the best interest of its residents. The Commission hereby pledges a tax increment to the payment of the lease rentals to be paid by the Commission to the authority under the lease. The Commission would hereby find the project is not a controlled project for the purposes of the lease approval procedures of the Indiana Code. And finally, this resolution would be in full force and effect from after its adoption by the Commission. So I've really just kind of summarized the highlights, and again, we can get into further detail if this Commission so desires.
Okay, well, thank you for that reading. I do appreciate that. So on that note, I will begin.
I'd like to ask Umball for a recap on the health of the finances from this decision, please.
And that can be included in the public hearing, correct?
I believe so.
Yes. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start the public hearing now. Thank you.
Thank you. The recap of the finances, part of the public hearing, yes or no? More of a summary.
Comment,
Okay.
after the public.
Okay.
Yes, we'll go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Emma Adlam. I'm with Umball, and we have prepared some schedules for you in connection with a proposed bond issue. The estimated par amount of the bond issue is $4,920,000, and this is to fund the estimated project costs for the bonds of, that is way too much, of $4.5 million, which is based on consulting with Kevin Krulik. This is the estimated cost for the project. There are some issuance costs built in, kind of the standard underwriter's discount that the purchaser would charge for buying the bond issue, issuance costs. And then since this is a lease financing, you're not allowed to pay interest during the construction period, so there's an allowance for capitalized interest as well. And then like your prior bond issue, there will be a debt service reserve on the bond, and we anticipate getting a surety on it with an estimated cost of about 4.5% of the reserve requirement. The next page shows the estimated amortization schedule for this bond issue. This is based on estimated interest rates. The actual rates will be determined with the negotiated sale with Stifel as the underwriter, like they were for your bonds issued earlier this year. And we're recommending the negotiated sale just because of the unique TIF stream. As different portions of the area expire, we really want to make sure that you have level debt service coverage, and that's easier to achieve when you have a negotiated sale and the underwriter really knows kind of the goals of structuring this bond issue. And they're familiar with Lebanon since they worked on the redevelopment district bonds and the lease rental bonds earlier this year. The estimated net interest cost on the bond issue is about 3.85%. Actual rates will be determined on sale, but that is kind of the estimate now. If you turn to the next page, this shows the comparison between the tax increment generated in the industrial park allocation area with your outstanding obligations, and then the estimated lease rental payments on these 2018 A bonds. So like I said, your TIF stream is a little different. As you can see in 2030, as portions of the TIF area expire, the estimated TIF revenues decrease. But the way these bonds would be structured is to provide approximately level coverage. If you look at the tax increment the estimated tax increment coverage schedule on the right. And then the remaining schedules are just supporting information for the estimated tax increment and the outstanding debt service. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. The maximums that you have in your resolution were based on the maximum capacity for the industrial park TIF with 125% coverage. Based on discussions with the city, you don't need that full amount is estimated, but that's kind of why the maximum, you can see the higher lease rental payment than shown on these schedules.
Okay. Are there any additional questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Gentry, do you want to say something? Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know you guys are very aware of this project and what we're doing here, but I wanted to just kind of review the chance for the public maybe watching at home. Take you back in the Wayback Machine, I guess the beginning of this year, when we started with our downtown project. Initially we had envisioned that project being the courthouse square, as well as this reconstruction of Main Street, which includes the Big Four Trail on the south side of that project. We took that project out to bid. Unfortunately, with the economy being what it is today and with all the work available in Indiana, those bids came in a little higher than we had hoped they would be for the first phase of the three sides of the square. So what we did is we ended up kind of splitting that project into two. So obviously we're moving forward on the first phase of the first three sides, and this, what we're talking about tonight, is now that second phase. It's always been intended to be part of the plan. It's always intended to be completed after or started construction on it after we've completed the downtown. But this was, again, just from a economic sense and kind of where the realities of where we were at the time, we needed to divide the project into two. So that's all, again, this has been voted on before, this has been approved before. This is just reevaluating the project. It's just the phase 2 now, dividing into 2 instead of 1. So again, this is really a total road reconstruction of West Main Street with inclusion of the Big Four Trail that will connect the downtown portion to its current trailhead, which means that once this project is complete, you'll be able to go all the way from north of Thorntown to Lebanon's downtown all on a bike trail, which I think will be a great amenity for our community and for the region as a whole too. So again, I think this is a critical project for us and would greatly appreciate your support. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
I have a question, Mayor Gentry.
Yeah.
Is this $4.5 million for the next phase? Is that the full design package, or is that the scaled back?
That is the full design package. Again, we're kind of estimating on where bids will come in based on previous and based on other NDOT bids that are going out right now. It's a good time to be in the construction business, so to speak.
Sure.
But that is if we choose to, and bids maybe come in higher than what we'd hoped. We can scale it back. We are structuring the bid just like we did with the first phase, where we can pull pieces out and scale it back to where it's, we take out some of the decorative features, things like that. But really, again, essentially the goal is to get the trail and also to address the infrastructure needs on West Main Street as well too. So exactly how we work through all these pieces is still kind of being worked through. It kind of depends on where the bids come in. There's different ways we can phase it, things like that. But our goal is to do what we can. And hopefully the bids come in at the right level. And again, that's part of our goal tonight is to hopefully move this forward. And then we can be looking at getting the bids out by the end of October, which then will allow for a very early construction or early spring construction. Kind of helps us to kind of hit that sweet spot, hopefully in the bids where people are thinking ahead towards next year, they're lining up work. So that's the goal for trying to move this forward as soon as possible.
So if we approve this tonight, Kevin's ready to take it to the next step and list it
Yes,
publicly in the next week or two?
Correct. There's a couple probably final details to kind of shore up and make sure all the bid documents are ready, make sure all the bid tabs can be broken out properly. But I'd say we're 95% of the way there, that we're ready to pull the trigger once we get the approval to move forward tonight.
And if I'm interpreting this correctly, we're still in that 10.5, 11 million total package between the two phases that we had originally.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. That was
from the get-go that we were looking at.
Correct.
It's just been restructured as the environment has allowed.
Yeah, timing's everything, right?
Sure.
And so when we did the first phase, we probably didn't maybe get those out as soon as we had hoped. Again, it was a more complicated project than dealing with construction is always more complicated than you think it is when you're going into it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the first phase was definitely the key, and we wanted to start there. But it's always been to do kind of a two-phase approach. It maybe wasn't always in the plans to do two-phase funding approach. So we're kind of doubling efforts there, but again, it was based on where the bids came in last time. It was necessary. So I still think it's a vital piece, and it's something that makes the downtown. It's what ties everything together, so to speak.
Sure.
So help me understand. What I hear is that the design is not finalized. We know what we want, but we just don't know what that price tag looks like at this point. So what I'd like to understand is
the design is finalized. It's what the bid documents, those are what's being finalized.
Right. But if the bids
itself,
come up too high, then we would go to an alternate route, correct?
Correct. And that's what.
Is that the only contingency is the pricing, or is there other contingencies that would drive us to a less than the full design package?
The goal is to, based on what the bids come in, right? The goal is to include it all, and hopefully the bids come in where we hope they will be, and we'll be able to move forward with as planned. If that's not the case and the bids come in higher, as we experienced on the first phase, then we have what our options are to scale that back, or also find some other funding sources as well too, right? It could be a combination of using the TIF, and then maybe it's a food and beverage, or it's Kevin's talked about doing reimbursing it through the Annapolis Avenue project, where there's utility relocation that we would pay for, then be reimbursed at 80-20% that we'd pledge. So there's some other funding structures we could, if we kind of need a plan B or a plan C even. But our goal is to get the design if we can get it. But again, it all kind of depends on when we open all those envelopes with what the bids come in at. So.
But just so that the public knows, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but just so that the public knows, the infrastructure for the full design is part of the I don't know the correct way to say it so it doesn't sound negative, but if we were to go the alternate route, the infrastructure is still there, so eventually we would have the opportunity to achieve the full design, but it may not happen in this particular phase.
May not have the decorative items.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. Again, it's
Okay.
either scaling back the decorative amenities of it. It's, maybe it's only a water main replacement and then a resurface versus a total reconstruction with curbs and stormwater and all of that too. So it can be broken out again, and that's where those bid documents that we're putting on the street, that's where we break out those different options to try to find what find the right sweet spot, so to speak.
Great. Thank you for the
Yep.
clarification.
I do have one more question
Yeah,
for
sure.
it. For phase one, are we at any risk, and maybe this is something you need to gather back with Kevin, but are we at any risk of it potentially running into next spring and having extra costs coming back to us? Or is that something Kevin can work in his current budget and contract documents?
So we're moving forward as fast as we can on it. Obviously, we've again, it's downtown construction in a old part of town. You never know what you're going to find sometimes, but we are still on. From my understanding, we're still on schedule for our early December completion, and we're pushing the crews as much as they can to keep moving forward. The last phase we have, Washington Street. The goal would be to start that here before, or roughly the first part of November. So we're still on that phase. The decision's been made that we're going to try to move forward on that this year. It is fairly unique, the fact that we don't have any asphalt we have to worry about. That the concrete is the biggest thing with the temperature-wise. So if we can get the concrete down, they can lay pavers even when it's really cold. So the goal is to move forward and complete the first 3 sides of the square this year still.
Okay, thank you.
There may be
Great.
some final touch-up maybe next spring.
Sure.
But it would be substantially complete by the
sure.
spring. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that overview. Appreciate
thank you,
that. Are there any other questions?
Any other
No.
public comment?
So now I will open the podium for public comment, excuse me, since this is a public hearing. So if you would like to make any statements in regards to this Resolution 2018-12, please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and state your case. Okay, there being no public comment, I will close the public hearing. And as far as the agenda goes, there is no action item. Just completing the public hearing is the action for this evening, correct? Okay.
Well, and actually, adopting it as well.
We need a motion.
Or motion and pass.
Oh, to adopt the resolution as well? Oh, okay. Very good. Well, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we adopt Resolution 2018-12.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Very good. Okay, well, that completes agenda item 3A. Let's move on to 3B, which is Resolution 2018-13. And this is a resolution which pledges the tax increment to the Debt Service Reserve Fund and covenanting to levy a special benefits tax related thereto. Wow, that was a mouthful. So, Chris, can you give us a high-level look at this one as well?
Absolutely, and thanks for taking on the mouthful for me. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So this kind of builds off of what this commission just adopted. Again, Resolution 2018-12, authorizing the execution of a lease agreement that would provide for the financing and leasing of certain local public improvements, otherwise known as the project, to the commission, to which the commission pledged tax increment to pay the lease rentals, and the commission reasonably expects that such tax increment will be sufficient to pay such lease rentals. However, to the extent that such tax increment is insufficient, from a special tax levied on all of the taxable property in the district in accordance with the Indiana Code. The authority will issue its lease rental bonds. These are Series 2018A bonds, payable from the lease rentals in order to finance the cost of the project and the costs relating to the issuance of the bonds. The pledge of tax increment to the payment of the lease rental shall be on parity with the pledge of tax increment to the payment of lease rentals under a lease dated as of December 15th, 2010. The Commission has been advised by its municipal advisor that a debt service reserve for the bonds enhances the authority's ability to market the bonds. The Commission has been advised by its municipal advisor that in order to provide a rating and purchase a debt service reserve surety policy Provisions need to be made to replenish the reserve on the earliest possible date following a draw on the reserve, and that the commission will need to pledge the tax increment to replenish the reserve, and to the extent such tax increment is not available to replenish the reserve, covenant to levy the special benefits tax and to maintain such levy until such time as the reserve has been replenished. Now, therefore, if it's resolved by this Lebanon Redevelopment Commission, the commission would hereby pledge the tax increment to replenish the reserve on the earliest possible date following a draw on the reserve, and such pledge shall be junior and subordinate to the pledge of tax increment to the payment of the lease rentals and all payments on the outstanding obligations. To the extent tax increment pledged in Section 1 of this resolution to replenish the reserve is insufficient or unavailable, the Commission hereby covenants to immediately initiate proceedings to levy the special benefits tax on the earliest possible date. Finally, this resolution would be in full force and effect from after its adoption by this Commission.
Okay, thank you. Sure, go ahead.
Ball, can you recap the finances on this one, please?
Sure. So as I mentioned, in structuring the bond issue, we have included an allowance for a debt service reserve surety. And a debt service reserve is necessary for the marketing of the bonds. It would be required by Standard & Poor's as you're getting the rating. It's just another level of security on the bond issue. So first, it's payable from tax increment. And as you saw in the schedules earlier, that there is sufficient coverage estimated to be available to make that tax increment. But bondholders want to have an additional layer of security just in case for some reason there's a delay in tax increment distributions or something really happens to your TIF. But as an additional layer of security on that reserve, the bond insurance provider for the surety, they want to know that if a reserve is drawn because tax increment isn't sufficient at that time, that there is a mechanism to replenish that reserve and to repay that draw on that surety. So this is first, you'd have to pay with any TIF you can, and then if TIF isn't sufficient, then you would levy the special benefits tax to repay that surety that you drew on.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Then I would entertain a motion.
Do we need to?
I don't think we need to.
Okay. No?
Okay. So I will go ahead and open it up for public comment if there's any. Please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes. And if you would like to make comments, please come up to the podium. Okay, having no public comment, then I would entertain a motion.
On motion, we pass or move resolution number 2018-13.
Second.
Having a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. Resolution 2018-13 has been approved, or adopted, excuse me. All right, moving on to agenda item C, or 3C. Let's look at the downtown facade grant request for 126 West Washington Street. Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Good evening, RDC. Thank you for allowing the applications tonight. The first application, as you mentioned, Jason, is 126 West Washington Street. To get you all familiar with what building we're talking about, maybe? There we go.
Oh, yeah. Factory.
Still haven't figured out the glare of this light.
It's for the 13.
This is the building at the northeast corner of Washington and Lebanon Street, owned by Mr. Ron Foster. Mr. Foster was at the September HPC meeting. I'm sorry, the August HPC meeting. Yeah, sorry, my dates are wrong on my notes here. And received a COA for the project. He is proposing a renovation of the building. This is a rendering of what that building looks like, minus the glare on the top. The building that the COA received a COA is for repair and paint all brick on the south and west facing walls. Applicant will work with city staff on final color palette. We're working in the Downing Sand palette, which is one of the Sherman-Williams historic color palettes. Install new aluminum storefront windows and entry door. Install hardy plank columns to separate new storefront window glass. Install EIFS cornice at top of building and above the storefront windows, which the new cornice will be here and in this general area right there. Install new cast stone base under the storefront windows, which the other picture did not show, but will be unfortunately replacing a green granite, very I don't know, depending on what the cycle you want to call it, 1990s at one point, 1960s at one point, so updating that look. And also repairing the parapet walls. So more or less a complete overhaul of the facade, bringing it up to a much more quality look. And the Historic Preservation Commission did issue a COA on that. As you can see from the other picture, there are at least 3 different color brick with the green granite, so bringing it into more of a uniform type look for the building. The applicant did submit the proper estimates for the project to receive a grant. And I will say that in both estimates, the applicant is going to be responsible for some improvements that fall outside of the grant guidelines. So he will be investing some of his own money outside of what you all are able to give him here tonight. So his the project cost is slightly greater than what you see in the RDC breakdown that you all have in front of you. So the first bid totaled $83,422 for available grant funds, and the second bid was $80,858. Both bids put him in category 9, which is $75,001 to $100,000, with the max grant being $61,500 from the RDC, and the owner will have every bit of his share of $38,500 in this project. So with that brief overview, I'm happy to answer any other questions. Other than that, I will turn it over to the applicant, and he can fill in the gaps of what I left out.
Hey, Derek, can you repeat those numbers again, what the grant request versus the investment from the homeowner would be, or homeowner?
Yep.
Property owner, excuse me?
Yep. The max grant is $61,500, and the owner share is at minimum $38,500.
Okay. Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Warren? Okay.
Not specifically, do we have a tally on how much we've granted out so far this year?
Caleb, what was that?
Do we have a tally for what we've granted out so far this
Yeah,
year from the RDC?
we're just a notch above $50,000, so there's $200,000 left.
There's 200 left.
Yep.
Okay, so we're not even close.
In all likelihood, these will be the last 2 applications that you will see this year. There was nothing submitted for the November meeting. Okay. That deadline has come and gone for the HPC. So even if we get a November application for the December HPC meeting, they won't be coming to you until January. So we have roughly $200,000 left to grant.
And in no way does my comment reflect my. I think that location's awesome. The Talent Factory has been great for the community. I've seen all kinds of posts and everything. So I just wanted to double check, make sure we weren't approaching that cap. Yeah. And it sounds like we're doing quite well. So
yeah, even with both applicants tonight, if you grant the full amount, we're still under what you have available for the year.
Well, out of curiosity, I'd like to know a little bit more about, you gave us the teaser of there's other investments being done to the building or other improvements. What sort of other things are being done?
Yeah, I mean, it's all in relation to kind of the rebuild of the storefront and what it costs to have the construction done. But as far as what the resolution talks about, those things just aren't available for grant money. So you have some drywall and some painting on the interior, some cosmetic improvements on the inside that just fall outside of the structural side of the interior improvements that you all can grant on. So those are pretty specific once you start moving into the inside, that they have to be more or less kind of load-bearing elements instead of cosmetic elements. So there are some cosmetic improvements that are happening outside of what's available here in the grant.
Very good. Very good. Mr. Foster, can you come on up, please? So we'll start with the really tough questions. No, I'm just kidding. So what kind of timeline do you have in mind for the project?
Well, we had hoped that we would be further along with approvals by now, but due to several factors, our own delay, but also the delay of getting on the calendar and then some changes with the RDC, we've been pushed back, which puts us into the winter months, which, depending on how the season goes, there are things that we can do and we'd like to do unless we're prohibited by the weather. The other factor that's a timing issue for us is what's going to be happening with Washington Street, because we would like to begin upon approval, but at the same time, we also know that there are going to be some restrictions in terms of access to doing the repairs to the facade that we'd like to do. So if we could do it in the winter months, we would. We'd obviously have to coordinate that with the improvements that are going to be going on Washington Street and how much room we would have to be able to work and not get in the way with what needs to be done there.
Sure. I do know that White has been very cooperative. I don't know to what detail with the opposite corner over there on the, I believe it's Main and East Street. And it may be very beneficial, actually, if everything can be worked out. So
I've heard that there's good cooperation, that
sure,
they will help out us doing what we need to do, and so.
So you're ready to get started now. It's just a matter of the weather.
We're ready to get started. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great news.
Follow up on your question to Derek a little bit more about additional investment. We've owned this building since approximately 2007.
Okay.
I'd like to really thank all of you and the mayor for the changes that have occurred in Lebanon. We were hopeful that this would have happened a long time ago, but we know things take time and improvements take time. The downtown city square is an integral part of the community, and we've wanted to participate in that. And without the facade grant program, the economics certainly aren't there to do some of the things we're talking about. We are making additional investments in the building. We've got mechanical items that we're going to be doing in terms of heating and cooling and other things that you can't see that aren't part of this program, but are an important part of the longevity of the building.
Very good. Very good. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Foster?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all.
Appreciate that. Hearing no comments or additional questions, I'd entertain a motion.
I motion we approve a grant for a maximum of $61,500 for the 126 West Washington Street.
We've actually got this.
We do public comment.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, before we take a vote, I will open it up for public comment. If you have any, please step to the podium, state your name and your address. Having none, I will go back to the motion that was already made and second that motion. So on that note, having a motion and a second, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Passed.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, moving on to another grant request for the downtown facade program. Let's talk about 127 through 129 North Meridian Street.
127 and 1 through 129 North Meridian Street. I will show you some pictures here that kind of tell two stories. Basically kind of what the building looks like today, again minus the glare. But the windows that you are hearing about tonight are the upper floor windows of the Meridian Street facing side and also the Washington Street facing side. The applicant again has been in front of the HPC at the this one goes back a little ways. He was at the May HPC meeting. Actually, it was late April. We had to, our May meeting moved into the April 30th date because of a conflict. So he did receive a certificate of appropriateness for really more of an overall complete facade renovation and a lot of many structural elements on the interior of the building as well. So I don't want to speak necessarily on the total amount of investments, I will let the owner speak to that if he so chooses, but we've decided to bite this off in chunks because the investment is so great. And it will become what should be one of the shining stars of downtown. The property owner is moving his corporate office to this location in the second floor. Not at this point kicking anybody out of the first floor retail spots. As those become available, his intentions are to remodel those as well. But right now he's focusing on the facade overall and the second floor. So at this point, with the way he's been working with contractors, he's decided to move forward with the second floor window project to get the ball rolling so that they can start moving on the interior of the second floor, which will allow them to sort of move into this space. So biting it off in chunks, but I'm not going to go over all of the COA approvals, but installing new storefront windows on the second story facade of this building with aluminum clad new construction windows was approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. The RDC estimates, which again you have in front of you, are pretty simple. I mean, this is pretty straightforward window replacement. The first bid was for, again, 22 windows on the second floor alone. So when you get into one of these corner buildings, you're dealing with some big numbers and large counts on certain aspects of the building. So the first estimate from Crahan Construction for the second story window replacements, 22 of them, was $110,000. Harmon Construction was the second estimate, and they were very close at the same amount, $112,500. This puts the request tonight in front of you at category 10, which is $100,001 to $150,000. The maximum grant the RDC has available to them in this situation is $83,000, and the owner share will be max of $67,000. So, as I mentioned, with the other applicant, this is just the tip of the iceberg on what this gentleman and his partners are investing into this building. So you will see this one coming back to you in 2019 for some further requests. But this is the start of it tonight. So
was that long side, the north side, facing the library?
Yes.
Okay. And can we go back to that picture?
Yep. Still up there.
Were they arch windows, or okay, they're just really tall ones. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I see more than just the second floor as well. So are we saying that those first story windows aren't happening in this particular project?
That's correct. They're just identified on here, and this rendering was brought to the HPC, so they knew exactly what windows we were talking about. So in this case, we're talking about this row of windows right here, and just to be clear, the front windows right here, and all window holes, for lack of a better term, the easy term to use, is they will be meeting those same spaces that were designed for the original windows. And that's very important to the historic integrity of these buildings, to not manipulate the space where the window fits in.
Derek, are there windows in the back as well?
1, 2, 3, 4. There are windows in the back.
I'm sorry. 17.
Yep. There are second floor windows back there, and I apologize I didn't print that picture off. I might have it.
How many employees are they talking about bringing that really changes the discussion?
They'd have to be 22.
I'm sorry?
Just out of curiosity, how many employees are they talking about bringing to that downtown location?
I'll let Mr. Jackson speak to that.
Okay.
For his corporate office. He's a commercial real estate broker, so he'll have some answers for you on that. It's certainly not a large scale office by any means,
sure.
But he has talked about it at the HPC, but I'll let him speak to that on those exact numbers.
Okay, so on the program though, that like I said, I can only count them quickly as soon as I can see the pictures. So that's 17 windows. Where are the other 5 windows?
On the back.
They are on the back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That works for me. So, Mr. Jackson, would you like to step up, please? Thank you.
And I will like to add, and you touched on this with Mr. Foster, all these applicants know that they have to dance around the downtown construction that's happening right now. They're all very aware of that. Like you said, Caleb, White has been very accommodating with these projects and more than willing to work. But when it comes down to who gets
priority
first place, we
Yes.
certainly know it's White, and everybody's aware of that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And just to add that the rear windows are visible from the public right of way, so that's why they do qualify in the grant program.
That's right above Periwinkle, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Matt Jackson, owner of the properties here with my brother Bart Jackson too. And one of the best things to do may just be open it up for questions. I can give you a little bit of, I guess, forestory to it, but about a year or so ago, Bart and I decided we wanted to buy a building. We looked in a couple different places. Then it was actually his idea. He said, "Hey, why don't we buy one in Lebanon?" I said, "Okay." So I started working with Ben actually, and then Derek, and there really wasn't anything. Well, kind of uncovered this, and we walked through it, and I was like, I think we could figure it out. But needless to say, there's definitely some Easter eggs in this thing. So first and foremost, we wanted to, target a time where we could get everything done and get ourselves in. And much like Ron was saying, I mean, there just things came up, and every contractor is busy right now too. And then I had a designer go on maternity leave, a contractor retire, and a little bit of everything. So it just got pushed back a little bit. But the good part about the exterior window side is if we can get it tightened up, then we can really start really quickly after the first of the year on the interior stuff. In our anticipation as our brokerage firm, Jackson Investment Group, we think we can be in by April 1.
Wow.
It may be aggressive, but we can maybe push so.
When are you wanting to get the windows done? As soon as possible, possibly this winter?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
I think assuming all goes well, we could get an order in a week and then have them in 3.5 to 4 weeks after that with install immediately, and then tighten the place up so we can not have anybody freeze when they're inside.
That's helpful. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
And drywall mud dries a lot better in 60-degree weather.
Absolutely. And they are pretty large windows, just as was referenced. A lot of them are over 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
So the clear height on the second floor in the front, it's actually it's a descending grade, and it's about, I want to say that to the bottom of the rafters in the front were like 16 feet on the second floor, and it runs to about 14 or 12.5 to 13 in the very back. So the windows, they don't look as big on the outside when you're out there, but when you get inside and actually feel how tall they are, they're pretty big.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Caleb had asked how many jobs you think would be brought here, and everybody likes to.
Oh yeah.
Those type of statements. So
what we currently have is my brother and I as partners, and then we do have a junior broker that would be with us. So she would be officing here, and then there's 2 others that we've talked to that have some interest, but a little hard recruiting talent when we don't have a home either. So
Very good.
Both working from home a little bit.
we're
right
working on
now.
that. We're
Yeah.
working on that, right?
So yeah, I feel like once it's done, it'll help a lot
Very
in
good.
regards to adding people, because then we don't have that excuse any longer. So.
Did I see Sampson Leathers in the other half of the bottom, or is that next door?
Actually, Truett Law Firm is on the north end, and
Okay.
then Patrick's is on the
Patrick's,
south
okay.
side, yeah, and then the candy shop on the northeast corner.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, I will open it to the public. Any question or comments from the public?
Mayor Gentry.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
I just want to take a moment and thank the commission for funding this facade program and helping impact our community. To be honest, this is one of the buildings I've wanted to get fixed for a long time. If you ever once Meridian Street is open, you guys can drive down it again. If you look up there right now, it looks like it's bricked in. It's actually not. It's actually painted plywood, right? Yeah. It's been painted plywood, very artistically done. It looks very realistic, but unfortunately it's painted plywood. So this facade program was kind of envisioned to how do we help building owners make the investments in their building to how they should be, right? And those shouldn't be painted up, painted plywood that looks like bricks. It should be real windows. It should open the second floor. So I'm very excited that you guys are considering this tonight, and I would appreciate your support because it's a small thing, but I think it does make a huge difference for our community when you don't see plywood covered windows. You actually see real windows in buildings. So appreciate your consideration.
I'd like to add to that comment as well, is that if you look at buildings like 101 West Main and the difference it's made to have those new windows installed, that I would like more of that as well. That looks very nice, and it's progressing quite well. So if we can have more of that, then I'm definitely all for that. And we need more folks like yourself that are willing to invest, because it's not like this is a free ride. Right. There's certainly some investment on your end and headache and heartache potentially that could go with it. So hopefully it goes very well. I hope the project goes well, and I hope that it can pass tonight. So I just want to say thanks as well from our side, because this is a team effort. So thank you for submitting that application, and thank you for all of Derek's work as well. Appreciate that. So on that note, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve a maximum grant of $83,000 for 127, 129 North Meridian Street.
I'll second that.
Very good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Very much. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, moving on the agenda to 3E. This is in regards to the Hachette training. And Mr. Worrell, would you please come to the podium?
Good evening, Commission members. Thank you for having me tonight. This goes back just a little bit to June of 2017, when a reimbursement agreement was finalized by the committee with Hachette Book Group. And this is actually in regards to a expansion project that they did in 2016, December of 2016. That resolution number just from the council was 2016-12. The reimbursement agreement was agreed upon with you, the commission, in regards to a training grant for that expansion project. Hachette had proposed a $2.5 million equipment expansion. They actually were moving into a new building inside the business park, the former Shopco space, and then expanding by 130 jobs. One of the requests inside of that reimbursement agreement was that there would be kind of regular updates to come back on that project to talk about how that progress was going. So happy to do that here with you tonight, and then also Hachette Book Group would be submitting that request for full reimbursement for that grant, which was $10,000 at that point in time. They are currently at 68 new employees out of that 130. Again, they've been given till about, I believe it was 2021 to reach that total number. And in fact, their equipment purchase exceeded the $2.5 million request that they'd done earlier. So they've installed even more equipment than what they'd originally proposed. Of those 68 new jobs that they've retained inside of Hachette Book Group, approximately 1/3 of those are actual Boone County residents. And so we continue to look at another employer that employs folks right here inside of Boone County. So always a good thing to see those companies expanding for one thing, but then also hiring right here inside of our community. Their training grants, as they've submitted to me, have well exceeded the $10,000 request. And so they are requesting up to that $10,000 maximum that you had granted. So I am happy to put together a invoice of sorts that outlines specifically that request, because I think there was a little bit of confusion as to how much they were requesting. So again, they were requesting the maximum amount that they were allowed for those training dollars. And happy to answer any other questions at this time.
So just for clarification, I understand that this was already voted on and approved. And at this point, we are approving the disbursement of the funds, similar to a claim.
Correct.
But at this point, we just needed some of the documentation in order to support that grant. Is this all accurate?
Absolutely.
And so at this point, the motion would be simply to disperse the grant that we've already approved as a commission. My question on that front would be for Chris, is that if Mr. Robertson was not part of that original approval of said grant, does that impact his voting ability for this disbursement?
Were any of us?
I was.
Okay.
So if I can interject for just a minute. On December 12th of 2016, there was a motion by Jason Nicolai to approve $10,000 for the workforce training grant, subject to a reimbursable agreement pending final legal review and coordination with Hachette Book Club. Seconded by Lambert, motion carries by a unanimous vote. So my question was, once we got to mid-year of 2018, we had not spent this money, and I contacted Ben, I think, and just was trying to find out where we were with all this. And so here we are tonight. And so I'm also looking towards Chris or Rob to see what we do tonight to make this happen.
And so the original grant, excuse me, just so I'm clear, I don't have a copy of some of the original documentation in front of me, but it envisioned that future releases would occur subject to this body's approval of those releases. Is that right?
Well, as far as the reading goes, the reading was only that it was approved at that point, that it did not have a vehicle inside of that motion to reapprove it. As far as it was read in our interpretation of that was that it was already granted. It just needed proof, and then the funds would be submitted. But due to the length of time between the approval and the request, that's what is bringing up the question marks.
I thought the money would be spent in 2017.
Yeah, this was part of a, sorry for interjecting
Yeah,
here.
no, you're
This
fine.
was part of kind of our economic development deal with them, so to speak, per se. So we wanted to provide, I don't believe we provided any tax incentive, or maybe a small one. We did a small tax incentive, but then also did this workforce training grant because we wanted to show them investing in their workforce. So it just took them a while, I think, to actually get to where they needed to check the boxes, so to speak, per se, to where they could use this grant and then apply for that reimbursement. So from my understanding, they've completed the training. So now it's just a reimbursable grant that was already approved. So that's kind of us keeping our end of the bargain, so to speak, from an economic development perspective. So personally, I don't think, Dick's, the fact that you weren't on the commission would impact your ability to vote on it. But
Right.
I don't think so either.
Thank you, Mayor.
I don't even know if we need,
right.
we've already had a motion.
I would just say pursuant to that certain grant agreement from a number of years ago, you're now putting into motion the mechanism to go ahead and get that reimbursement going.
Okay.
Can I see the number? Which one?
There is no resolution. There is no, it was just.
Okay. Okay, well then I'll just make it simple. Motion to approve the disbursement of the $10,000 that was previously granted to the Hachette
12 of 16.
training program in 12/12 of 2016.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being a good steward of our information. I appreciate that. So, thank you very much. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is claims. Are there any questions or comments about the claims?
I motion we approve the claims.
Second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Very good. And before we adjourn, I need to thank Mr. Robertson for joining our Redevelopment Commission. Appreciate you giving even more time to the city. We look forward to some healthy debates as well as some good conversations. So welcome, and I certainly appreciate you volunteering to give the city even more of your time. So thank you very much. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So on that note, there's...
And just real quick, Rob Shine, city attorney, had an obligation. He's now back. I think he had one more item to bring up before we adjourn for this evening.
Yes, Commission, Mr. President, my understanding is there was a motion tabled as far as finalizing the vice president and the secretary. And the one thing that I would ask is we do need action on that this evening. This commission, if it wishes, can make any changes at a later date. So we do have a quorum here, so we would like an action taken tonight.
The question was since we do have a quorum, the majority would require the nominee to vote for himself.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that acceptable?
Yes, that is.
Okay, then, all right, well, then we'll add agenda item F to the new business, which will be, let's go ahead and do the nominations for vice president this evening. So I will make a motion to nominate Caleb Edwards as vice president.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the second role that we need to fill this evening is secretary. I would like to make a motion to elect Dick Robertson as secretary of the Redevelopment Commission.
I will second that.
Very well. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. Congratulations. Welcome to the commission and to the secretary role. I guess you're lucky it wasn't president. So anyways, no, thank you very much. On that note, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very well. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Dick Robertson and Caleb don't go anywhere.